So, if I put you in a room with a complete stranger, your brain is going to decide whether they are capable of destroying your life in like less than 3 seconds,
Yeah, less than 3 seconds. It's incredibly fast.
which is just wild to think about. Welcome to this deep dive. Today, we are looking at something you interact with every single hour of every single day, yet you probably never think about how it actually mechanically works, and that's trust.
Right.
Because without it, I mean, commerce just grinds to a halt, intimacy vanishes, entire institutions crumble. But we navigate this massive load-bearing structure using nothing but vague folk wisdom.
Oh, absolutely. We treat it like magic,
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
we act as if trust is just this aura someone gives off rather than a totally quantifiable, deeply biological and psychological mechanism.
Yeah.
The invisible architecture of human civilization is actually running on a very rigid set of physiological and sociological rules.
And really dismantling that folk wisdom is our mission for today. We have a massive stack of research sitting here today, spanning psychology, neuroscience, economics, and sociology.
It's a lot of material.
It is. And the goal is to look at the actual science of it all. Like, how is trust formed in those first 3 seconds? Why does it shatter so violently? How does it shape entire global economies?
Yeah, we're even going to get right down into the specific linguistics, like the exact words you can use to foster it in your own daily life.
Right, because the science over the last 3 decades has really given us a picture that is far more actionable than the old adages we grew up with.
Totally. But to even begin, we have to throw out the idea that trust is just a single monolithic thing.
Yeah, looking through these sources, that seems to be the foundational error most people make, right? Treating all trust exactly the same.
Exactly. The research splits it right down the middle into a family of phenomena. You've got cognitive trust on one side and affective trust on the other.
And cognitive trust, that seems to just be the brain doing math. Like it's a purely rational assessment of someone's track record.
Yes, it is entirely evidence-based. So when your brain is evaluating cognitive trust, it is scanning for ability and intention. It's asking, does this person have the competence, the reliability, and, the historical data to prove they can do what they say they're going to do?
Right.
You build it by delivering on commitments, actually demonstrating expertise, and this is key, being clear about your limitations.
So it's basically a spreadsheet. My brain is just looking at row after row of past behavior and projecting a future outcome.
Yes, exactly. A spreadsheet.
Like, if a coworker hits every Friday deadline for 6 months, my cognitive trust of them is extremely high.
Right, but that is only half the architecture.
Yeah.
Contrast that with effective trust, which operates on an entirely different channel.
The emotional channel?
Yeah, effective trust abandons the spreadsheet entirely. It looks at emotional connection. So the brain isn't asking, are they competent? It's asking, does this person genuinely care about my well-being?
Which is a huge distinction.
It's massive.
Yeah.
It requires the belief that your relationship with this person is more than just a utilitarian transaction.
And it seems like you absolutely need both for any relationship to actually function. I mean, the sources make it clear that if you isolate one from the other, the dynamic becomes incredibly dysfunctional.
Oh, totally.
Let's say you have high cognitive trust, but zero affective trust. You get a relationship that is highly reliable, but completely cold.
Right, it becomes purely transactional. You will trust that person to execute their job flawlessly, but you are never going to confide in them.
Never.
You will never give them the benefit of the doubt if something looks slightly off. You'll stick rigidly to the parameters of your contract with them, and you'll expect them to do the exact same.
There is basically zero grace in a purely cognitive trust relationship.
None at all.
And I think we've all worked with that exact person. You trust them to run the quarterly numbers perfectly, but you wouldn't trust them with a minor secret about your weekend plans.
Yeah, exactly. But flipping it is almost worse.
Right. High effective trust with zero cognitive trust.
It produces a dynamic that is warm, but just agonizingly frustrating.
Because you love the person.
You love them. You know without a shadow of a doubt that they have your best interests at heart, but you simply cannot count on them to execute anything.
They're the friend who will, like, drop everything to comfort you during a crisis.
But who will consistently forget to pick you up from the airport, even after promising 3 times.
Yes, exactly. It really makes me think of hiring a contractor to work on your house.
Oh, that's a great way to look at it.
Right. So cognitive trust is that contractor showing up at 7 a.m. sharp every single morning, bringing the right tools and framing the walls perfectly plumb and level.
Right.
But effective trust is knowing that same contractor actually cares about the safety of your family who will be sleeping under that roof.
Yes.
Because if you only have cognitive trust, they might use toxic glue because it's cheaper and technically meets the local building code. They did the job, but they don't care about you.
And if you only have effective trust,
Then they love your family, but the roof collapses in a snowstorm because they don't know how to calculate load-bearing weight.
yeah, that is exactly it. The most robust relationships, whether we are looking at a marriage, a friendship, or a corporate boardroom, they actively cultivate both.
You need the competence to survive the elements and the care to ensure the structure is actually meant for you.
Beautifully put.
Yeah.
But understanding these psychological definitions is just the surface. To understand why we crave both types of trust, we really have to look at what is physically happening inside the body.
Yeah.
Like what happens when we feel that relief of being around someone we implicitly trust?
Right, because trust isn't just some abstract concept. I can physically feel the tension leave my shoulders when I'm around certain people.
You absolutely can.
And the neuroscience research points almost exclusively to one highly specific molecule, right? Oxytocin.
Yes. The pop science world likes to call it the cuddle hormone, but the researcher Paul Zak, who has pioneered much of the work on this at Claremont Graduate University, he calls it the moral molecule.
The moral molecule, I like that.
It's a 9-amino acid neuropeptide produced in the hypothalamus. And Zak's methodology for proving this was incredibly rigorous.
Yeah, he wasn't just like asking people how they felt on a survey.
No, not at all. He was conducting actual trust games where participants exchanged real money, and he was taking blood draws to measure chemical spikes in real time.
Which is so cool. The mechanics of those trust games are fascinating. So participant A is given money and told they can send some to participant B.
Right.
Whatever they send will triple in value, and then participant B can decide whether to share the profits back or keep it all. It's a literal test of vulnerability and return.
And what Zak found in the blood work was undeniable. When participant A sends the money, when they send a social signal of trust and make themselves vulnerable, participant B's brain experiences a massive surge of oxytocin.
Wow.
The receipt of a trust signal physically manufactures this neuropeptide in the brain.
That is incredible.
But here's the critical mechanism. That elevated oxytocin doesn't just make participant B feel warm and fuzzy. It physically alters their subsequent behavior.
Okay, how so?
It makes them more empathetic and cooperative, which makes them highly likely to actually return the money.
So the act of trusting someone literally injects them with the chemical required to make them trustworthy.
Yes, it's a neurobiological reciprocity loop.
A self-sustaining biological feedback loop.
Exactly. Someone signals trust to you. Your hypothalamus produces oxytocin. The oxytocin makes you feel more trusting toward them, so you act in a trusting manner back.
And then your reciprocal action serves as a social signal to their brain, triggering their oxytocin.
You got it. Trust manufactures the neurochemistry for more trust.
I have to push back on this loop concept, though.
Okay, got it.
If trust creates this perfect, beautiful feedback loop where we just mutually drug each other into being great collaborators, why does collateral damage exist?
What do you mean?
Like, if a boss at my last job betrayed me, I'm going to walk into my next job highly suspicious of my new boss. But if my new boss gives me a trust signal, shouldn't my oxytocin just kick in and start the loop over? Why am I holding on to the baggage?
Ah, that is a great question. It's because the biological reversal of this loop is violent, and it has a much longer half-life than the oxytocin spike.
Oh, wow. Okay.
When you experience a betrayal, your body does not perceive it as a simple social misstep. It perceives it as a literal threat to your survival.
Seriously.
Yes. Your amygdala sounds the alarm and it activates a massive stress response.
Yeah.
We are talking about flooding your central nervous system with cortisol and adrenaline.
The classic fight or flight response.
Exactly.
But
But it goes beyond just making you feel anxious. That flood of cortisol and adrenaline acts as a chemical jammer.
A jammer.
Yeah, it binds to receptors and actively downregulates your oxytocin system. It suppresses it completely. So, in the immediate aftermath of a betrayal, you are neurochemically incapable of processing trust signals.
Wait, really?
Yes, your biological receptors are literally blocked by stress hormones.
So my brain is physically rewiring itself to block out any new trust signals to protect me from another threat. I'm not just being cynical, my hardware is in lockdown.
Yes. And because this is a systemic neurochemical state, It bleeds into entirely innocent new relationships.
Oh, that makes so much sense.
It explains why a betrayal by a romantic partner makes it agonizingly difficult to trust the next person. It explains why a toxic corporate culture ruins your ability to engage at your next job.
The shadow of that stress response just lingered.
It casts a very long shadow, and it takes significant time and consistent counter-evidence for the cortisol levels to drop enough for the oxytocin receptors to be receptive again.
Well, if our biology is this sensitive and the stakes are this high, I mean, either we get the collaborative oxytocin loot or the lockdown cortisol threat response, we clearly aren't waiting around for 6 months to decide if someone is safe.
No, not at all.
We have to be assessing people at lightning speed.
We assess them in milliseconds. Building trust is not a slow, deliberate process where we sit down with a clipboard and logically weigh the pros and cons of a new acquaintance.
Right.
It relies on a rapid social assessment architecture that evolved to keep us alive.
And the research points out that in those first few milliseconds, our brain is scanning for two specific dimensions, right? Warmth and competence,
Yes.
which maps perfectly back to our earlier definitions. Like, warmth is the rapid assessment of effective trust, and competence is the rapid assessment of cognitive trust.
Absolutely. And the sequence matters too. The very first primal question your brain asks is about warmth. Are their intentions toward me benign?
Like, do they mean me harm or are they friendly?
Exactly. Once it establishes that, it immediately asks the competence question. Can they actually execute those intentions?
Oh, I see.
If they want to hurt me, are they capable of it? If they want to help me, are they actually useful?
So if you assess someone as having high warmth but low competence, you basically see them as a lovable fool.
Right. You like them, but you won't trust them with anything critical.
And if you assess them as highly competent but lacking warmth, you view them as a competent threat.
Yes. You respect their abilities, but you keep your guard up because you don't really know who they're working for.
So full trust demands that your brain checks both the warmth and competence boxes almost instantly.
It does. But demonstrating that quickly is a huge challenge.
Yeah.
I mean, you cannot show a 5-year track record of competence in a 5-minute introduction.
Right. So what is the shortcut? How do you bypass the natural suspicion of a stranger?
One of the most reliable, thoroughly documented shortcuts is the controlled disclosure of vulnerability.
Which sounds completely counterintuitive.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, if I want you to think I'm highly competent, the instinct is to project absolute bulletproof perfection. Why would admitting a weakness build trust?
It all comes down to evolutionary signaling theory. In biology, a reliable signal is one that is costly to fake.
Like what?
Think of a peacock's tail. It's a massive handicap, which proves the bird is healthy enough to survive despite it.
Oh, interesting.
In social dynamics, when you share a genuine vulnerability, an imperfection, a lack of knowledge, a struggle, you are taking a social risk. You are handing the other person a small piece of ammunition that they could potentially use to judge or harm you.
And by taking that risk, I am signaling that I trust them to handle my imperfection well.
Precisely. You are initiating the sequence. You send a costly signal of trust, which, as we know from Paul Zach's research, triggers their oxytocin, making them trust you in return.
It's hacking the loop.
Exactly. Furthermore, a performance of absolute perfection often triggers our rapid assessment alarm system. We know intuitively that nobody is perfect.
Right.
So when someone pretends to be, our brain assumes they're hiding something much worse. Admitting a small imperfection disarms that suspicion entirely.
I really love the tactical applications of this in the sources. There's this fascinating concept of delivering bad news early and without any spin.
Yes, that's a perfect example.
Like, think about driving a car with a passenger. If you see a massive pothole ahead that you can't avoid, you have two choices.
Right.
You can stay silent, hit the pothole, and let the passenger slam their head against the window, all to protect your ego as a quote-unquote perfect driver.
Oh.
Or you can say, brace yourself, I took a bad road and we're about to hit a massive bump.
And the latter requires admitting a mistake.
Exactly. But by prioritizing my decision-making, giving me the chance to brace for the impact over your own comfort in hiding the mistake, you prove your trustworthiness.
You really do.
The person who tells you a project is failing before you are forced to discover it yourself is demonstrating their priorities. They are proving that your agency matters more to them than saving face.
It is one of the absolute clearest signals of cognitive and effective trust you can ever send in a professional environment. It literally says, I am competent enough to recognize the failure, and I care enough about your well-being to warn you.
Wow. Yeah, that's powerful.
It really is.
Well, we've been looking at this on a very microscopic level, like individual neurons, interactions between two people in a car or an office. But the research gets staggering when you zoom out.
It does.
Because these individual mechanics scale up to millions of people, creating vastly different cultural baselines of trust across the globe.
To really understand the macro view, we have to look at the World Values Survey. It is a massive, ongoing global research project that has been tracking social trust since 1981.
Okay.
They use a standardized question across wildly different cultures, which is simply, in general, do you think most people can be trusted?
It's a profound metric because it's not asking if you trust your mother, it's asking for your default setting toward humanity at large.
Exactly, and the geographic variation is enormous. In Scandinavian countries, so Norway, Sweden, Denmark, Finland, consistently, 60 to 70% of respondents say yes, most people can be trusted.
Wow.
7 out of 10 people operate on a default assumption of benign intent from strangers.
But then you look at parts of Latin America, certain nations in Africa, and pockets of East Asia, and that figure plummets to 10 to 20%.
Yeah, it creates a fundamentally different daily reality. Economists and sociologists measure this under the umbrella of social capital.
Right, social capital.
High-trust societies experience higher economic productivity, vastly better health outcomes, and significantly higher subjective well-being.
Well, the economic side of this relies heavily on the concept of transaction costs, right?
Yeah.
Like, if you live in a society where you generally trust strangers, you don't have to spend your time, money, and emotional bandwidth verifying everything.
Exactly. You don't need to hire a lawyer to review every single minor agreement. You don't need to install a biometric lock on your front door. The friction of daily life is incredibly low.
And that saved energy and capital can just be redirected into innovation, leisure, and community building.
Precisely. Low-trust societies, by contrast, are suffocated by friction. Everything takes longer. Every agreement requires layers of enforcement. The transaction costs literally eat up the resources that could otherwise be used for growth.
I do wonder about the relationship between the individual and the state here, though.
Okay, how so?
Like, is a high-trust society just a place with really friendly neighbors, or is it a top-down institutional achievement? Can I live in a society where I trust the people on my street perfectly, but I assume the federal government is entirely corrupt?
You certainly can, and that dynamic defines many regions of the world, actually. We really must separate interpersonal trust, trusting the stranger on the bus, from institutional trust, trusting the courts, the banks, and the legislature.
Okay, that makes sense.
However, they are deeply intertwined in a bidirectional relationship.
How do they feed into each other?
Well, when you have transparent governance and a strong, uncorrupted rule of law, it obviously builds institutional trust. But more importantly, it creates a safety net that allows interpersonal trust to flourish.
Because the stakes are lower.
Exactly.
Wow.
You are more willing to risk trusting a stranger because you know that if they do betray you, there is a functional, fair system to hold them accountable.
Oh, I see. The institution underrates the interpersonal risk.
Yes. Conversely, societies with high interpersonal trust create environments where institutions can operate legitimately without having to resort to constant coercion or force.
And the sources point out that deep historical and cultural norms anchor these baselines too. Scandinavia's high trust isn't just about modern government, it's rooted in cultural concepts like the Jante law.
Oh, the Jante law. It's a fascinating sociological phenomenon in Nordic countries. It is this unwritten cultural code that heavily emphasizes social equality and actively discourages individual superiority or, standing out from the collective.
So it prioritizes the cohesion of the group over the ambition of the individual.
Exactly. And when those norms are passed down through generations, often stemming from harsh agrarian histories where mutual aid was literally required to survive winter, it sets a societal baseline where cooperation is expected and betrayal is culturally exiled.
It paints this picture of societal trust as an incredibly precious, hard-won resource.
It really is.
Which makes the next section of the research incredibly sobering because we have to talk about how trust is destroyed.
Yes. There is a profound, heavily documented asymmetry in how trust operates across time.
Asymmetry.
Trust is built incrementally, slowly, through repeated, consistent demonstrations of reliability. It requires a very long timeline of evidence.
Right.
But it can be destroyed utterly and completely in a single event.
It takes years to build a reputation and 5 seconds to ruin it. Why is our brain wired to be so incredibly unforgiving?
It goes right back to the evolutionary savanna. There is a harsh logic to this asymmetry. If you trusted the wrong person in a primitive environment, it wasn't just a matter of losing a business deal. It could be fatal.
Like if I trust the guy who says the water isn't contaminated, and it is, my genetic line just ends.
Exactly. So our brains evolved a security architecture that weighs negative evidence far more heavily than positive evidence. It's known as a negativity bias.
The negativity bias.
If someone performs 100 trustworthy actions, your brain simply categorizes them as trustworthy so far.
So far.
But a single act of profound betrayal forces your brain to fundamentally recategorize that person. One betrayal proves they are capable of betrayal.
So the single negative data point just carries disproportionate weight because it signals a potential threat to your survival.
What's it exactly?
Let's categorize the specific behaviors that detonate trust, because obviously not all betrayals are created equal.
No, they aren't.
The sources call out deception as the absolute radioactive bomb of relationship.
Discovered dishonesty is arguably the most destructive force in human interaction.
And the reason why is fascinating. It's not just that one specific lie is harmful. It's that deception retroactively poisons the well of your entire shared history.
Right.
Like if I discover you lied to me today about a major project, my brain doesn't just isolate that lie. It immediately, involuntarily recalculates our entire past.
Yes, you start questioning everything.
What else were you lying about last year? When you praised my work, was that a manipulation? When we signed that contract, were you hiding something?
The scope of the damage expands infinitely backward in time.
Deception breaks your fundamental grip on reality regarding that person.
It forces the victim to question their own judgment, which is exactly why it generates such a massive stress response. But deception isn't the only destroyer. Inconsistency between stated values and actual behavior is another massive one.
The classic example is a corporate leader who gives speeches about the critical importance of work-life balance, but then habitually emails their team at 11:30 p.m. on a Saturday and implicitly expects a reply.
It destroys cognitive trust completely because it introduces unpredictable variables. It signals one of two things to the employee.
Okay, what are they?
Either the leader is actively lying about valuing balance, or they possess so little self-awareness that they're deceiving themselves about their own behavior. Neither option makes them a reliable partner.
Then you have the betrayal of confidence, sharing a secret.
This is a profound violation because it demonstrates a fundamental misalignment of judgment.
How so?
Well, what you treated as highly sensitive, protected information, they treat it as casual gossip. If their judgment about what requires protection is that misaligned with yours, your brain naturally assumes their judgment is misaligned in many other critical areas as well.
And finally, there's the slow erosion, the death by 1,000 cuts, consistent, small unreliability.
Yes. A single instance of letting someone down is almost always forgivable. Traffic happens, calendar glitches occur.
Right.
But a pattern of micro-unreliabilities, consistently being 10 minutes late to every meeting, frequently forgetting minor details you promised to handle, routinely under-delivering by just 5%, it erodes cognitive trust in a uniquely insidious way.
It's insidious because there's no explosion, right? There is no massive dramatic event that forces a confrontation or an apology.
Exactly. You can't easily confront them because each individual offense feels too petty to bring up. You were 7 minutes late. Feels like an overreaction. But cumulatively, your rapid assessment architecture had logged the data. It is concluded that this person cannot be relied upon to accurately predict or control their own behavior. They become a liability.
Which brings us to the hardest question in all of this research. If trust is this fragile, if our evolutionary biology is flooding us with cortisol and screaming at us to stay away once we've been burned, is it even possible to repair a shattered relationship?
It is possible, but the research shows it is agonizingly difficult.
I bet.
Repairing trust takes vastly longer than building it in the first place because you are no longer starting from a neutral baseline. You are starting from a deficit, fighting against that evolutionary negativity bias we talked about.
Right.
Repair is only possible under incredibly strict specific conditions.
So let's walk through the anatomy of trust repair. What is the absolute first prerequisite?
The first step is full, unmitigated acknowledgement of the violation.
This is where almost everyone fails, isn't it? The instinct is to mitigate, to deploy a PR spin.
Deflection destroys the repair process before it even begins. You cannot say, I was less than transparent. You must say, I lied. You cannot say, mistakes were made. You must say, I made the choice to breach protocol.
You have to name the full weight of the action without caveats.
Yes.
Why is the exact wording so critical?
Because of the psychology of the injured party. If you only partially acknowledge what you did, the victim's brain concludes that you do not fully understand the reality of your actions.
Oh.
And if you don't understand the depth of what you did, you are highly likely to do it again. Full acknowledgement proves that you see the same reality they do.
This perfectly explains why the classic non-apology is so infuriating.
Oh, the worst.
When a public figure or a colleague says, "I'm sorry you felt that way," or "I apologize if anyone was offended," they are essentially committing a second betrayal.
They absolutely are.
By failing to name their action, they are signaling that the actual problem is your sensitivity, not their behavior.
Yeah. It is a profound invalidation of the victim's reality, which just further spikes their cortisol. Once full acknowledgement is achieved, the second prerequisite is genuine accountability.
Which means acknowledging the impact, not just the action.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You have to say, I lied to the client, and I understand that by doing so, I destroyed your credibility with the account team, and I take full responsibility for putting you in that position. You have to bear witness to the pain or friction you caused.
And the final piece is the hardest part, the actual behavioral change.
Over a long timeline, the most important trust-building mechanism after a betrayal is consistent, reliable behavior that explicitly demonstrates the exact values that the betrayal violated.
Right.
If you lied, you must over-index on transparency. If you are unreliable, you must become impeccably punctual.
But even if you do all of that perfectly, the rebuilt trust is never identical to the original trust, is it?
It is not. Rebuilt trust carries the scar tissue of the event. Yes. It incorporates the knowledge that a betrayal occurred and was survived. It can become deep and profound again, sometimes even stronger because it has been tested. But it requires a realistic expectation about time. You cannot demand that someone trust you just because you apologized. The evidence required to rebuild is exponentially greater than the single event that destroyed it.
We've covered a massive spectrum here. Personal relationships, global societal baselines, the devastating math of betrayal and repair. But I want to pivot to a highly specific arena where all of these forces, cognitive, affective, biology, and language, dictate absolute success or failure on a daily basis.
Workplace.
The workplace, organizational trust. This is where Paul Zech's neurobiological research transitions into hard economic metrics, right?
Yes. He took his findings on oxytocin and trust loops and applied them to entire corporate ecosystems. He surveyed thousands of employees to measure the differing outcomes between high-trust and low-trust organizations.
And the numbers are staggering. Employees working in high-trust companies report 74% less stress than those in low-trust companies.
A 74% reduction in stress is a life-altering metric.
Yeah.
It means the cortisol systems we talked about earlier are not constantly activated.
Yeah.
But the positive metrics are just as impressive.
Yeah.
Employees in high-trust organizations report 106% more energy at work. They literally have double the stamina. They show 50% higher productivity, 76% more engagement, and 40% less burnout.
How does trust translate into a 50% spike in productivity? Mechanically, what is happening on the office floor that allows that to happen?
It brings us right back to the concept of transaction costs, but localized to an office space. In a high-trust company, you eliminate massive amounts of friction. Think about the exhausting, invisible labor performed in a low-trust environment.
Okay.
You spend hours monitoring your coworkers. You verify every claim someone makes before acting on it. You spend 40 minutes drafting a defensively worded email to ensure you have a paper trail to cover your tracks.
You CC your boss on every minor correspondence just in case someone tries to throw you under the bus 3 weeks from now.
Exactly. That is all wasted energy. When you remove that friction, you enable incredibly fast decision-making. People can act on each other's representations immediately.
Because they aren't second-guessing everything.
Right. Furthermore, high trust creates psychological safety, which is the absolute bedrock of genuine knowledge sharing. In low trust environments, people hoard information to protect their status and their jobs. In high trust environments, they share information freely because they know they won't be exploited for it.
I think of this as the trust tax. Every low-trust environment is paying a massive, crushing trust tax.
I like that, the trust tax.
It's completely invisible on the balance sheet because you can't measure what never happened, but it is bleeding the company dry.
Absolutely.
The trust tax is the graveyard of unpitched ideas where employees hold back brilliance because they fear being mocked or having their ideas stolen. It's the 2-hour meeting where absolutely nothing is decided because no one actually believes the stated positions of the people talking.
Yeah.
It's the critical feedback that gets withheld out of fear of retaliation, allowing a doomed project to drag on for another 6 months.
The cumulative cost of that tax is enormous. The absence of productivity is a silent killer for a business.
So, if you want to avoid paying this tax, if you want to build that high-trust ecosystem in your own professional life, you have to know how to signal trust accurately.
You do.
And the research gets incredibly tactical here. It comes down to linguistics, the literal words you use.
This is particularly fascinating when we look at English-speaking, low-context professional cultures. In these environments, trust signals are heavily, rigidly encoded into specific language patterns.
By low context, we are talking about cultures where communication is expected to be explicit. It relies on the words themselves rather than unstated social hierarchies, body language, or subtle situational cues.
American and British professional cultures are prime examples. In a high-context culture, being somewhat indirect is often a sign of social sophistication, politeness, and respect. But in a low-context professional culture, directness is a primary trust signal.
Yeah.
Saying exactly what you mean, clearly and specifically, builds cognitive trust.
Which means excessive hedging is a massive danger signal.
It is. The person who qualifies every statement who says, I think maybe we could potentially consider looking into this approach, reads as untrustworthy to the rapid assessment architecture.
Right.
It's not that people think they are actively lying. It's that the communication pattern is associated with evasion, a lack of conviction, and a lack of cognitive competence.
But that brings up a paradox that I found absolutely brilliant in the source material, the power of acknowledging uncertainty.
Yes. Paradoxically, explicitly stating what you don't know is one of the highest trust-building behaviors available in these cultures.
How so?
Saying, I am not certain about that data point, let me verify it before I give you a definitive answer, builds significantly more trust than a confident assertion that turns out to be a guess.
I love this because it perfectly marries the cognitive and affective elements we started with. In a culture obsessed with competence, admitting I don't know is a vulnerability.
It is.
It triggers the affective oxytocin loop by showing you are willing to risk your ego. But simultaneously, you are proving your cognitive reliability by promising to find the true answer rather than lying just to look good in the moment.
It creates the persona of a calibrated communicator. A calibrated communicator is highly confident and direct when they possess the facts, and explicitly uncertain when they do not. That calibration makes them deeply predictable and therefore deeply trusted.
What about the language of commitment? The sources draw a hard line between I will and I'll try.
Well, this is a big one.
Think about the last email you sent to a client or a boss. Did you say, I'll try to get this to you by Friday because you wanted to give yourself an out? You probably thought you were playing it safe, but your language just signaled incompetence.
Specificity and commitment signals the seriousness of the intention. Saying, I will have this to you by Thursday at noon, is profoundly more trust-building than I'll get this to you as soon as possible.
Because it's concrete.
Yes. As soon as possible leaves room for interpretation. It forces the other person to monitor you, which increases their transaction costs.
And the final piece of this linguistic puzzle, the follow-up.
It seems like a minor administrative task, but explicitly closing the loop is perhaps the highest trust communication behavior available. Doing exactly what you said you would do, and then explicitly confirming that you've done it.
Saying, as I mentioned I would, here is the file.
You are sending a receipt for your cognitive trust. You are proving that your commitments are tracked, honored, and delivered. This allows the other person's brain to completely relax.
Oh.
You are actively lowering their cognitive load. You take the burden of remembering the task off their shoulders, which is a tremendous signal of reliability and care.
We have covered incredible ground today. We traveled from the foundational split between the spreadsheet of cognitive trust and the emotional core of effective trust.
You really did.
We looked under the hood at Balzac's trust games, seeing how vulnerability literally manufactures oxytocin and how betrayal floods the system with cortisol jammers. We zoomed out to the World Values Survey to see how Scandinavian Jante law and historical cooperation built societies that run on low friction, while low-trust societies drown in transaction costs.
Yeah.
We explored the brutal evolutionary asymmetry of how fast deception poisons the well and the agonizingly slow, precise anatomy of an apology required to repair it. And we brought it right down to the specific words we use, the calibrated communication, to avoid paying that invisible trust tax at the office.
It is a complex, delicate system. But as we synthesize all this source material, there's a final, highly provocative thought I want to leave you with.
Okay, let's hear it.
We learned today that oxytocin creates a biological reciprocity loop. Trust generates trust, which means In a low-trust environment, whether it is a deeply cynical corporate office, a strained personal relationship, or a fractured community, someone has to be the one to take the first neurobiological risk.
Oh, wow.
If everyone waits for the other person to prove they are safe first, the system remains permanently frozen in a stress response.
Someone has to absorb the risk and be vulnerable first to kickstart the chemistry.
Exactly. How much power do you individually hold to change an entire ecosystem just by being the first one to offer a signal of genuine vulnerability? By being the first one to say, I don't know the answer, or I trust you to handle this, you have the biological ability to initiate that loop.
That is an incredible thought to carry with you. It brings us back to where we started. Trust is the invisible architecture of your life. But unlike a steel bridge, it isn't static. You are actively building it or dismantling it with every rapid assessment, every shared vulnerability, and every kept promise. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Take these insights into your very next interaction. We'll catch you next time.